Hey everybody, welcome to This Woman Can. I am your host, Janice Sutherland, career strategist for the ambitious woman of colour over 40 who's looking at transitioning or realigning their careers. Now, my guest this week, I'm always curious, you know that, and I'm really looking forward to this week's interview. My guest this week is Gina Gray. And if the name Gray rings a bell, it will do, because I interviewed her daughter in a previous episode. And if you didn't hear it, I'll drop the link in the show notes. But when Tiffany and I were having a conversation, she said, oh, you really need to speak to my mom. She's on a real career transition. I thought, well, always one, looking for the next interview, the next story. You know, I didn't hesitate in taking that up. So a little background about Gina. Gina's career has been a mix of entrepreneurship and corporate employment with local and international companies, mostly in sales and marketing. And combined, she spent 18 years with international organizations, 3M Interamerica, DHL Jamaica, and DHL USA. In December 2020, however, she retired from the corporate world and surprisingly found herself journeying into the art world. And she herself says surprisingly, as her educational background was heavily science-based and with an executive MBA accrued along the way, and with a few corporate transitions herself throughout her journey. Gina is now a fully fledged artiste, creating abstract art and curating her own art gallery. So that is that's a transition, Gina. Welcome to This Woman Can.
Yes, thank you very much. It is and as I've said, totally caught me off guard. I was actually working with DHL in the USA when this revelation came about. I had worked in DHL in Chicago for 4 years, right, and then moved to Kentucky, which that is another situation as well. And all this time I was living in the USA working with DHL. I made that journey by myself. So right, when I got to Kentucky, I was I had all this time whenever I'm not at work, and I just got absorbed through social media into art that came across my page, and I decided to just do it. So I tried it, I liked it, people liked what I was producing. And so every spare moment I had, I was creating art.
Now, great story, but I think there's a few steps in between. Because
a lot.
because it's especially from the art, because as you said, you were in Kentucky, and art just came across, just came into your social media feed. You're not an artist, or you never, did you ever dabble in art, or you just, so what made you think, oh, I can do that?
So what made me think I can do that is after I did it, people liked what I was doing.
Okay.
And then people offered to buy what I was doing.
Wow.
And really and truly, I spent about a month staying up watching YouTube, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, because I was literally mesmerized, right, at what I was seeing. And this is how I am about everything in life. I'm very focused about everything I do in life.
Yeah.
And after absorbing myself in it, I said, you know what, you need to start doing and stop watching. So I went to the local art store, Michael's, for those persons in the US who know of Michael's.
Yeah.
And I bought my first set of supplies. I was actually coming home to Jamaica for a quick holiday, but I did my first 2 paintings before I came home. And that's where it all started. And I became an addict, going to the art store 3-4 times a week.
You had developed a habit.
And a lot of money on art supplies, but I wanted always to try this, try that. And, I kind of branded the name I used for my art as Science to Art, GG, because of that transition from the science mind to art. And a lot of people have actually since told me that they want either see the science in my art or say, art is science.
Right.
So,
sorry to cut you, but I was actually thinking that.
Yeah. So everything that I did, today, every single piece of artwork that I do, to me, is an experiment.
Right.
You know, people ask, you know, what were you thinking when you painted this? What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking anything. I was actually doing an experiment with either technique or with colors.
Yeah.
I like to use a lot of texture in my artwork as well. And then where my pleasure comes from is when I'm finished doing the artwork and people look at it and they tell me what they see. I always just sit back and smile silently and just listen to them.
Yeah.
And it's more about what the viewers see more than what I was trying to create or think about when I was doing it, because it's all abstract. It's not like, you know, I'm trying to reproduce a landscape or a seascape or something like that. So
right.
So, yeah.
Now, I did have a sneak peek on your website, and I was very curious because you had a particular type of art, and it was from cremains. Is that the right word?
Cremation art.
Cremation art. So now that can't get much more unusual than that from art. so what led you in that direction as well? Because that's very niche.
So can I tell you, last year, a friend of mine, her mom died.
Right.
And she and her girlfriend, who's also a friend of mine, they both love my style of art.
Right.
And she wanted to create some sort of a memoir for herself and her kids.
Right.
And her mom was being cremated. So they came up with the idea, something that wouldn't get lost easily either.
Mm-hmm.
So they came up with the idea and asked me if I could incorporate her ashes in a piece of art. So, as again, with every new challenge that comes my way, I do not shy away. And I said, sure. And that's how I ended up in the US as well. I just said, sure. So I actually did a little bit of research, discovered that in the US in particular, it is a thing where people incorporate cremation ashes in art for pets and loved ones.
Okay.
And so I actually did it for her. And I must tell you, it was a very humble and solemn moment when I was actually doing the incorporating the ashes into the artwork. And I'd created 2 pieces for her and incorporated it. And when I sent them to her, she was in tears. It was really quite a touching moment. So that's how I got into it.
Okay.
I have to confess, however, that the Jamaican culture hasn't really warmed up to cremation art as yet. As somebody gave me feedback one day, they said, you know, we're not into the duppy business.
And for those listeners who are not quite sure what duppy is, it's all about ghosts, zombies, ghouls, that kind of stuff. Spirits.
Yes.
So I understand that, and I think that would be a Caribbean. I think it'd be a Caribbean thing, not just Jamaican.
Of course,
I think it'd be. I don't. We don't even have. It would be Caribbean. Yeah. We'll talk offline.
Of course.
We'll talk offline. So so Gina, at this stage in life, at this stage in life, in your retirement, you've got this new art passion. What has been unique about pivoting? At this stage, what have been the challenges or the opportunities that have presented themselves?
Well, you know, I think first of all, you know, I'm not really quite at retirement age. And I actually consider myself more of being retired rather than trying to develop a business, an art business. Art is something that I've come to love. But I think that's the reason why I made the decision that I did is that when I just came back home, I actually retired 1 year after coming back home, which was not my intent, right? But after coming back home, right after I came back, there was COVID, which nobody could plan for. And then it was in April of 2020. My brother-in-law actually passed away very suddenly.
Right.
Not COVID. It was a heart attack. And I said to myself, oh my goodness, I don't really want to be working until that time comes.
Yeah.
But I had a conscience about, you know, leaving the organization so soon after coming back home. They had really been so good to me throughout the years. And so I said, no, I have to stick it out.
Right.
And my birthday is actually November. And we went through the spike of COVID again in the summer. And in about, I think it was like September, I think it was, I said, no, this is it. I am going to stop working. I'm going to give myself the gift of retirement.
Okay.
And
nice.
Yes. And I shared that with my local and regional managers. Much to their surprise, of course. They asked me to hang on until the end of the year because there's a particular project I had proposed which had just been approved. So they asked me to stick around to implement. I said, no problem. That's very reasonable.
Yeah.
So I worked out until the very end of December, recognizing as well that, you know, while I did want to, you know, still develop the art business, but I wasn't going to be, you know, I'm going to be one of those artists, that's what they say, starving artists. I'm only going to feed myself off of the art, but I was going to do it because it's something I love. And then I also knew that I wanted to spend time supporting my daughter by taking, you know, doing the grandma thing, you know, taking my granddaughter to school, after school activities and all of that. So having made that decision to stop working, it was a release, but it also afforded me the time to exercise. So Monday to Friday, I go and do a 5K walk every day.
Yeah.
I've lost 13 pounds. My eating habits have changed.
Right.
The stress of life went away.
Yeah.
The stress, it is true. And I'm sure you've heard people say it, you're working to live and pay the bills and whatever, and you're not getting a chance to live.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, the opportunity was to really become a better person personally rather than professionally.
Right.
And I had reached, you know, everybody has a particular point in their career that they want to reach. I had actually achieved my career objectives. Yeah. So I felt accomplished. Some friends of mine have said not many people can say that, but I have felt accomplished from a professional and career perspective. So now I'm doing what I want to do. The challenge, of course, is that, I mean, you have bills to pay, right?
Yeah.
So, and then also trying to inject life into a new business at a time in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
It's not an essential.
Yeah.
There's a small percentage of the population that are art enthusiasts. But, you know, I have not let that, you know, bothered me. I do some sort of diversification. I make craft items in between. I try and capitalize on the special holidays. And actually, interestingly, about half of my art customers are not in Jamaica.
See,
they're outside of Jamaica.
And I think we have to have, if especially those of us who are self-employed, I for myself consider myself to have a global business, because I don't have to be where I am. My customer, I'm where my customers find me here, but you know, but they can live anywhere in the world. And I think that's a great position to be in.
Yeah. And I think that the pandemic has really kind of opened up people's minds to realize where it was in front of them before, but they just didn't think it was possible.
Absolutely.
It has forced them to do that. So
absolutely. So in effect, you know, you're not traditionally retired. You're no longer in the corporate world. So retirement,
right?
So it's like me, retired from the corporate world, but reinvented yourself in an entrepreneurship career, which still has its challenges.
Yes.
You know, because it's just you now. You know, there's no organization to fall back on.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
but still just as much effort, you still need to put much effort into it, but as you said, it's giving you the flexibility to focus more on you and the things that are important to you outside
Yes,
of career.
and family life as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I know what you mean about reaching the top, your achievements,
Accomplishing, yes.
accomplishments. I totally
Yes.
understand what you mean, because
Yeah.
it's what next. Well, if that's not exciting, I've done that. I need,
Yeah.
like, we're still here for a little long. We're still going to be here hopefully for a little longer.
Exactly.
We still need
Yeah.
something to keep us vibrant, excited, and wanting to get up and
Right.
do something different. So
Yeah.
thanks for that. So Gina, making this transition from that corporate to entrepreneurship, or making that change, is there anything you wish you had known when you embarked on that reinvention?
I don't think so much on this particular reinvention.
Yeah.
I think I had a more major reinvention while I was working with DHL in the US.
Okay.
Only because throughout my career, most of my career had been in sales and marketing.
Right.
It was only in the last, I think, 2.5 to 3 years of my time in the US, about half the time in the US, that I made a switch from sales to operations. Right.
Yeah.
And it was good in the sense that the company really facilitated cross-functional movements, not just cross-functional training, but cross-functional movements.
Right.
And I think for me, that what I wish I had known then was more, I wish I had the opportunity 10 years before.
Right.
I started working with DHL when I was just after my 50th birthday. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had been working with local companies, having, taken that break, being a stay-at-home mom, and then getting back into the corporate world.
Yeah.
And I realized that based on my personality and what I needed, and the experience I had with 3M, that I needed to get back into the international corporate world. Right. And having worked with DHL, and the opportunity came to go and work in the US, because most of my time with the company was in the US.
Right.
While I was there, I said, while I believe in not regretting anything in life, everything is an experience. I wish I had been able to embark on that part of my career 10 years earlier.
Right.
So I think for me, being able to have had the opportunity at an earlier age would have been good. I embrace change, which is also a huge life learning for me, by the way, along the journey. But I embrace change. So I tend to look more at, not so much, what did I wish that I know, but how can I learn what I need to learn? To shorten the learning curve, and to be successful in the change that I have made or has been presented to me. So.
And I like what you say about embracing change. So, but there's quite a few women I've worked with who are reticent, or have a fear of change, because it's obviously the fear of the unknown. So for those women who are thinking, I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'd love to do something different, but I'm fearful of making that change, what advice would you share with them?
So I think the very first thing that is important in making that change is having a good support system. Right. And I say that, and the environment. And I say that because, as I mentioned earlier, the DHL supported the cross-functional changes, right? So I would say, first of all, if there's an area you want to move into, have a conversation first with your immediate supervisor and talk about the change. And then get their support in speaking to somebody in the other area that you want to get into. And if possible, ask to spend maybe an hour a week, some amount of time in that area to get to learn more about that job. Because it is true what they say. Careful what you wish for. The grass is not always greener on the other side. All the various cliches, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful about the move that you actually make. Think about what your personality match would be. No, operations actually is a personality match for me because I'm very black and white. I'm very process driven. So those things work great for me. Ambiguity don't work for me, right? So that was a great match. And I actually, in a previous job, had wanted to get into operations. And I asked to get into operations when a vacancy came up. Yeah. But the feedback I got was, no, you are a much better salesperson, stay in sales, right?
Right.
And I was not very happy about that.
Yeah.
So I was very happy when I got this opportunity. So I would say really, and if the support is not obvious, seek it out, right? Because you are going to need that support. And then you also have to keep an open mindset because you're going into something that's new and you're not going to get it right away.
Yeah.
So, you know, assuming now that you make the change, learn everything you can about that new position that you're in. Learn from the people that are actually doing the job or have done the job. And then, you know, as you go along, you will get better at it. And that's the same with anything in life. I mean, this may not be a fair comparison, but if you think about being a mom, I mean, I remember when I was pregnant and I was like, oh my God, am I going to know what to do with this child and everything else? And I mean, you figure it out. Definitely. And you have a lot of support around you. Yeah. It's like when you're in university or in high school, when you move from one grade to the next grade, you're being challenged more as you go along, but you have the support. Yeah. That's kind of what I think the common thread is. Fabulous. The support, and it may not be obvious, so you may have to seek it out. Yeah.
And I like what you said about having that conversation, no matter what it is, because one of the things I work with is to someone that there are some conversations you need to have, and you can't avoid them. You know, and it could be your boss, it could be your loved ones that you want to make this change. You know, you could have turned around and said, look, I don't want to work in the corporate world anymore. I want to give it all up and I want to go and do this art thing. And then people look and go, what? You're leaving a big job, you leave, you know, and I'm sure you had, you had those, you know, what is wrong with her? You know, she's not an artist, you know, and stuff like that.
I did have a few people when I just started doing the art. Think exactly that way. But again, people who you have to be confident in yourself and confident in what you're doing, and that has always been my personality as well. If there's something that catches my eye or catches my brain, and I decide to go after it, you know, I'm all or nothing. I'm going for it. You know, but I do also recognize that if I'm going for it and it's not going to work, I also know when to stop. Right. And that's important. So you have to be true to yourself as well. You can't keep digging a hole for yourself. But throughout my life, I mean, there's so many stories I could tell you. But throughout my life, there are a lot of things that I've gone after, and I put my heart in it. Because if you don't put your heart in it, as I'm sure you know as well, you're not going to be successful at it, you know? So you have to be sure that this is what you want to do. That's where it first starts. Right. You have to be sure. And then you also have to weigh all the pros and cons, as in any business, all the what ifs, you know, what happens if, what's the worst that can happen? You know? And that's how I've gone through my life, not just my professional life, but my personal life. What's the worst that can happen?
Fabulous. So, you know, you sound like you're very focused, Gina, and, you know, you really go for it. But what part has failure played in your success?
You know, I'm going to tell you one story. When I went to the US for the interview for that job, right? No, I'm sorry. The preliminary interview was a phone interview. Right. And then I had to go and do the interview in person. When I came back to Jamaica and got the phone call that I was going to be offered the job, the hiring manager said to me, I've decided to offer you the job because I recognize for you, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Which is true.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking about it, and I've had a few failures in life, coming up from high school. But when I think about the things I failed at in high school, they weren't important to me.
Yeah.
Like, I failed at geography and history and had to do extra lessons. That's not me. My brain is not wired that way. But when I went to university, my first real failure came because in my first year, I failed biology.
Right.
And I remember that my biology teacher from sixth form, who to this day we're still friends, I told her about it. And she said to me, Gina, sometimes failure is not a bad thing. And sometimes you need a failure to be able to succeed. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So failure is good. And it equates to experience, right? So the important thing is to learn from that failure.
That's definitely.
What happened or what did not happen?
Yeah. What
was in your control? And then learn from it and not make that mistake again. And this is really, it seems simple, but at the beginning of the interview, I was telling you, offline that I'm a very time conscious person.
Yeah.
I remember when I decided to go back into the working world, having been a stay-at-home mom, not used to getting up, going to work at a time, come back home. Work was to start at 8:00 and I had to drop the kids to school, and I was getting to work at the office. They would draw a line at 8:05. So anybody under the line was late. They showed up on the late report. Wow. And I showed up on that late report once, and my manager at the time spoke to me about it. And I was like, no, you're not talking to me about this again. And he never had to speak to me about it again. I'm on time for work every single day. I just got the kids out of bed earlier and left home earlier to beat the traffic because the traffic was a problem. Yeah. So we got ahead of it. Definitely. So I learned, for me, that was a failure, and I learned from it. And that's also something I've instilled in my girls. Things don't always go the way you want them to go, but you have to learn from it. And I recognize too, we're all human, so you're going to get deflated. Yeah. But the important thing is to not stay deflated. Yes. Do the human thing, but get it out, and then think about it, and then move on from there, and just ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. So just flicking forward or flicking back or flicking forward, to your most recent transition now, your retirement, etc. What is your semi-retirement? Retirement doesn't seem right when you're still, it's not quite right. It's not quite right. Yeah.
If you know how many hours I don't spend in doing my art, you would see why I call it retirement.
Okay. I'll take that. So, what has been the most difficult part of the transition, and what would have made your journey easier, do you think?
I don't really think in this particular instance it was difficult, because it was a very conscious decision that I made. When I came back to Jamaica, and I figured I was going to retire at 60. So I was going to work, for 2 or 3 years and then retire. Yeah. But the art side of the business, because it was so fresh and new and people liked what I was doing, I was going to be doing it alongside working, right? Doing it in my spare time, because that's something you could do. I wasn't really conflicting with my primary responsibilities at all in any way. So it was always there. When I started doing the arts, back in 2019, my vision, because I'm always thinking ahead, was to have an art gallery. Right. And lo and behold, I have an art gallery. I'm actually doing this interview from the art gallery today. Yeah. So it was an easy transition for me because I knew what I wanted to do. Yeah. So, it is actually different from the time when I decided to become a stay-at-home mom. That was way more difficult because I actually would wake up in the mornings and didn't know what to do with myself. Yeah. I actually went through periods of depression because I felt useless. I wasn't doing anything with my time. So that was very difficult. because the circumstances were different. This one has been very easy. My friends are jealous. But it has been very easy because it was a very calculated and conscious decision that I make.
Yeah, yeah.
The only thing is it happened a year or two earlier than I had planned. Right. But it was a very calculated decision.
Right. But I think that's the thing, is that, you know, even though it happened earlier, you were still planning for this. Because when you realized oh, this has got legs, this is something I could do, you had already started planning, you were calculated. Yes. So, you know, and I think that sometimes is where a lot of women can lose focus, because they're stuck. They don't know what the next is. You had identified your what next. Yes. And it was totally abstract, even though you do abstract art. Yeah. It was totally abstract to what you were doing. You know, sometimes people find things that, you know, are in line, or, you know, utilize their skills, but yours is almost complete left field. You didn't know you had this hidden talent. And it's like, wow, it just emerged. So it was the right time. Yeah. It's got to be in the right time.
Yeah. And I think because of that too, if I could give advice to other women, because there was actually a lady in my last role in the US who worked for me. She was, I think she was a couple years older than me. And she had been doing that job, still is, for many, many years. And we would have conversations about what next, you know, what is she going to do after retirement? And she didn't really know what to do. And I would have to talk to her and give her ideas. And I think that in today's world, things are very different from back then. I think in today's world, you know, women can just take the time, take a step back, think about what their passion is, because if they go something that they're passionate about, maybe something they wanted to do when they were younger, but because of the way life went, they didn't have a chance to do it. You know, think about how you can model that into what they do with their time after they retire.
Absolutely.
Don't think about it after retire. Think about it before you retire.
That's what I work with a lot. You know, so like, what is your plan? What is your what next? Don't let it catch you off guard. Start planning, but be in control of it. And when you feel in control of the process, you know, that's where the success happens.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true.
So we're coming down to our last couple of questions. Get you out of the hot seat.
Sure.
So what are the three things? What three things have you learned about yourself during your career?
Well, it kind of ties in with the failure question, right?
Okay.
I have learned that I have always underestimated my abilities. Okay. That's and then another thing that I learned, and it was only because one of my managers said it to me, that I had courage. He says, Gina, you have managerial courage. And that's because any challenge that would come up, I was not going to let it beat me. I was just going to keep going. I had to be successful. I could not fail. And I think the other thing that I learned about myself, again, feedback actually from, you know, a VP in the organization, is that I have very strong soft skills that you cannot teach. And that's one of the things that made me successful as a leader in my career.
Excellent. Great observations. And typically, where would we find you at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning?
In my bed watching English Premier League.
You're a footy girl.
Yes, I actually play fantasy Premier League. So when the season is over, I go to withdrawal and I'm like, what next? Funny. When is the season going to start again?
That's funny. That's funny. I mean, that's great. That's great. That's going to be, it's going to be the best answer I've had so far. It's usually washing, or I'm at the gym, or I'm relaxing, but watching the Premier League. That's going to be my best answers. And so the last official kind of interview question, Gina. What does success feel like to you?
For me, I consider success when I actually accomplish a goal or exceed expectations. And then I'm like, yes, I did it. I did it.
So it's accomplishment. That's what it feels like, accomplishment.
And if you notice, it's all tied in back with that failure question.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's accomplishment. Yeah, my fear of failure.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Now, that was my last official interview question. It was fabulous. So if people want to know more about your art or find out more about what you do, how can they do that?
Okay, so they can go to my website at www.science2artgg.com. Or you can find me easily on Instagram, Gina Gray, or Science to Art GG 2019.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you, Gina. That was my last question. Thank you
so much. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with you. Thank you.
Excellent. You're welcome. Thank you very, very much.